The sessions come thick and fast, and they're all really interesting. But this one I'm really looking forward to because we're going to tap into America. We're going to break the States. Our second session is with a gentleman called Brett Yormark, and he's in the business of making deals. He also knows a thing or two about branding. That'll be no surprise to you today. Now, he masterminded the NBA team, the New Jersey Nets move and transformation into the Brooklyn Nets. He signed the multi-million-dollar title sponsorship deal that saw their new home named after the British bank Barclays. And with the NHL team, the New York Islanders set to move into the Barclays Center later on this year, and a project to transform the historic Nassau Coliseum venue in full swing. Brett's got plenty on his plate. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome, he's already here on the stage, CEO of the Brooklyn Nets and Barclays Center, Brett Yormark, with James.
Morning.
Hello, Brett. Thank you, Ore. Brett, the introduction indicates that you are a very busy man, so thank you very much for taking the time to come from Russia?
No, I was Russia, New York, and London.
Well, thank you for travelling over anyway.
Yes, absolutely.
Lots to talk about, so let's get cracking straight away. Brooklyn Nets, you've been in...
We have a video first.
I know you have a video.
Oh,
I'm just trying to introduce the video.
Yeah.
Oh,
okay, go ahead.
Well, you can do it. Okay, you can do it.
Well, I mean, it's been a busy year in Brooklyn. In fact, this week we celebrate our third year with the existence of the Barclays Center. It's gone extremely quickly, and what I thought I'd do is kick off a quick video that kind of gives you highlights for the last 12 months. So let's take a look.
I've got a list here in front of me, Brett. Brooklyn Nets, Barclays Center, Nassau Coliseum, moving the Islanders to Brooklyn, Paramount Theatre. Clearly you're in the business of building major brands from scratch. How do you go? What's your starting point? How do you go about doing it?
I think the starting point for probably most of us in the room is to do your research and do your due diligence. And for us, it's really about understanding the market, the consumer, and the space that we're going to be in. And we've historically done that, whether it was relocating the Nets into Brooklyn from New Jersey or now doing what we're doing relocating the Islanders into Brooklyn from the island. So I think we lean on research quite a bit. Not that we listen always to the research, but it does create a framework for us as we look to relaunch brands or to transform brands.
Clearly, it's a sort of different environment in the States to what it is over here in the UK. But there's a very clear brand distinction, I think, between the teams that play at Barclays Centre, particularly the Nets, and Barclays Centre itself. Is that distinction a sort of conscious thing, and why?
Absolutely. I mean, when we were relocating to Brooklyn, we looked at the Barclays Centre as a brand that was distinctly arm's length of the team. We position the Barclays Centre as a brand that fulfills experiences and creates memories, as you saw in the video. The team is really positioned as a brand that hopefully we can create affinity for. You know, fans for the team, fans for the players. And they are very different. And we continue to nurture each of the brand identities every year and in fact reinforce them.
When the Nets were still in New Jersey, and obviously you knew you were going to move, how did you go about the process of defining what this new team's brand should be, what its values should be?
Well, it was a bit of a process. When I first took over the Nets about 11 years ago, there was a thought that we should transition the name Nets over. There was a thought, at least initially, and Jay-Z was a bit of the co-architect, if you will, of the new brand in Brooklyn, that we should tap into the heritage of the brand, which was from Long Island. And then shortly before we ultimately launched, there was the thought of, let's embrace brand Brooklyn. It's iconic, it's global, it's hip, it's cool, it represents strength and grittiness. And we felt that was a better position for us to take because Brooklyn was the brand. We felt there was enough equity, given the 35-year history in New Jersey of the Nets, that we should keep that part of the name, but really marry it with this iconic global brand Brooklyn. And I think we did an incredible job in transitioning the brand, really embracing that all the good that Brooklyn has to offer. And I think in many respects, when you look at a crowded marketplace like New York, where there's 9 pro sports teams and growing, you need a key differentiator when you build that brand. And for us, it was brand Brooklyn.
Possibly I'm not the best person to sort of say this because I'm definitively not cool. But the Brooklyn Nets are that's definitely a cool brand. And how do you go about, as a sort of a sports executive, probably you're not cool as well, Brett.
I'm not cool.
How do you go about imbuing a new sort of sports entity with coolness? I mean, do you rely on Brooklyn and everything that stands for? Obviously, you mentioned Jay-Z. Did you play up Jay-Z's involvement in the whole thing?
Yes, I mean, it was a combination of factors. Jay-Z was probably the biggest. Jay-Z is an icon in Brooklyn. He provided us with immediate street credibility. He's a tastemaker and obviously a major influencer. Brand Brooklyn stands for some incredible things also. You know, when you think of global grittiness, strength. And the borough over time has gone through a bit of a renaissance where it has truly become hip and cool. Great restaurants, a lot of young people are migrating to Brooklyn. So we wanted to embrace all of those things. A third component was also working with Adidas and making sure that we would create a color palette that represented cool and hip, but was also timeless. And that's what helped us identify the black and white as the lead colors for the Brooklyn Nets. So I think in combination between the work that Adidas did, Jay-Z's influence, and then obviously embracing brand Brooklyn, it gave us an opportunity to position the brand very differently, and hip and cool are some key attributes of the brand.
We've got our own Brooklyn here in London. It's called Shoreditch. Would you recommend, I don't know, take a Premier League for Tottenham Hotspur, would you recommend they move down the road and become Shoreditch Hotspur?
Well, I'm not sure that's going to work, but maybe I'll defer to you on that one.
You are moving another tier. It's you're sort of repeating the trick by moving the New York Islanders NHL team, ice hockey team, to come and play at Barclays Centre as well. Is that the same? Obviously, you're not changing the name. Is that a similar process, though?
Very different. In fact, I was talking to my colleague this morning about it. The fans don't like me right now on Twitter, and in fact, one of the things I do use is social media to truly determine the appetite that fans have for either transforming a brand or, for that matter, even modifying or refining a brand. And this has been a great process with the Islanders, because when we left New Jersey, we were really shutting the door on a 35-year history of the New Jersey Nets. And candidly, if most of the people in the room and most of the fans today don't even remember the days in New Jersey. And it was only 3 years ago that we played there. The Islanders, very different process. There is a tradition that goes along with Islanders hockey. They won the Stanley Cup 4 times in the 80s. They do have a hardcore fan base, although they don't have many fans. Those fans that do exist are very hardcore and very vocal. So for me, it was a brand balance. It was, how do you maintain some of the current traditions and relocate those traditions into Brooklyn, while at the same time embrace a new fan base in Brooklyn and beyond, and infuse that Brooklyn attitude and grit into the overall brand architecture. And I think we've done that. On opening night, which is next Friday, the 9th, you'll see a lot of traditions that existed in Long Island for 43 years that have transferred into Brooklyn. At the same time, we're going to infuse that Brooklyn attitude. In fact, we launched a third jersey last week, where in the NHL you can wear it 12 times. And it's black and white. And it speaks to the colors of Brooklyn. It speaks to the borough in a very authentic way. And in some respects, it also tries to create connectivity to brand Brooklyn Nets. The fans don't like that in Long Island.
They don't like change.
No, they don't like change at all. However, the new fans in Brooklyn love it, because you got to speak to that fan base in an authentic way. And I think we've done that. And it's really been a balancing act. In fact, since we launched that third jersey, it's been the #1 seller in the NHL. So there is a demographic that is gravitating to it. And again, we want to speak to that new fan. At the same time, you can't alienate that old fan, because you want to grow that that ticket base, and in order to do that, you don't want to give up what you've had. So it's been a bit of a balance.
You're a bit of a globetrotter, and the Nets have been globetrotters in the past. You always seem to sort of put your hands up whenever there is a global game on offer, or a chance to come to London and get the brand in front of people who wouldn't necessarily have it in front of them normally. You've told me in the past that Barclays Centre is a truly international brand, a truly international destination, and you have a similar aspiration for the Nets, but they're not quite there yet. How are you internationalizing your brands, and why are the Nets a little bit behind the Barclays Centre? Well,
I think there's restrictions that the league places on us, and that's not a negative. But obviously the NBA has become very, very global. We've got the global games that are forthcoming here in the next couple of weeks. You'll see games staged all over the world. Unfortunately, this year we're not participating, but we were in China last year. But there are limitations on what we can do, from a team perspective, although Adam Silver and his incredible team, I think, is looking to provide more flexibility so that teams can, in fact, truly globalize themselves. And I was here yesterday on meetings for most of the day. One of my meetings was to stop to see Ben Morrell over at the NBA office, and we're discussing, where the Nets might be next year. And we're talking about a possible exhibition game in Russia, because obviously with the Russian owner, we've got a great connection to that market. And there's even talk that we might even go into India. So from a Nets perspective, we continue to push that envelope to try to globalize the brand and the franchise. And for us, we've done it in lots of different ways to date. Whether it's playing globally, whether it's having an identity that speaks to the global marketplace. I mean, we're a top 3 seller, our jersey, in China. The Chinese consumer does gravitate to black and white as a color palette. They like brand Brooklyn. And through our digital platforms, we're able to speak to fans throughout the world. And again, the league is giving us more latitude to do that on a daily basis. From a building perspective, we don't have those limitations. And when we were creating the Barclays Center brand and our arena brand, one of the things that we looked for was a global partner. And thankfully, we were able to identify one at Barclays. And just having that name as a halo over our venue has provided us with, that global positioning. That if we had done a deal with more of a local or national company in North America, I'm not sure we would have had that positioning. So having them as a naming rights partner has truly given us, a lane in the global marketplace, and it's something that we're very proud of.
Are there any questions from the floor at this point? One here at the front. Could we just have a microphone just down here, second row, Pav? So if you just say your name and go ahead.
Yeah, hi, good morning. Mo Hamzin from London Business School. In terms of your decision making and then processes, particularly with innovation, does it start with real estate? Does it start with product and then brands are wrapped around it? Or is it always brand fit when you're making it, or could you separate it at all?
As it relates to our particular business?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's a very good question. We're partially owned by a real estate developer. So I don't want to say that real estate is driving, our enterprise growth or how we look at brands, but it does play a major factor. Once we identify, from a real estate perspective where we want to go next, whether it be NASA or Paramount or some of the other things we're working on in our pipeline, then we really do look at the brand architecture of that particular location and the identity of that particular venue, whether it exists or not, and how we want to position it. But in the recent decisions we've made, they have been driven by real estate. Getting into the real estate market in Long Island, as an example, furthering our footprint in Brooklyn, and you'll hear in the coming weeks our first foray into Manhattan. Those decisions have all been driven based on the fact that we want to grow our venue business, create some scale in and around New York, and what's driving that is really the real estate values.
May I ask just a quick follow-up question? In terms of your product is experience within your centers, do you produce the experience then fit it within the brand, or is it you take the brand in mind and create the experience?
I think to me, it's you create the brand, and then the experience substantiates that brand promise. So when I'm meeting with my head of marketing, whether it be for the Islanders or for the Nets or for the building, truly it's brand first. And whatever promise we're articulating in the marketplace through our advertising, whether it be transactional or image, we need to substantiate that with the experience that we give that fan every day, whether it's arena-based or whether it's a hockey experience or a Nets. That experience fuels that brand promise, and that's how we look at it.
Thank you.
I want to move away from that slightly, Brett, and talk about the concept of brand in a slightly different way. As a sports business geek, I'm obviously slightly in awe of you. You've got a reputation, certainly in the US sports industry. Brett really is a master deal maker, hundreds of millions of billions of dollars of deals you've done, first at NASCAR and then with the Nets. And certainly in the States, you are renowned as a commercial hawk.
He's being very nice. He's being very nice.
But certainly, but you were talking about how you like to use Twitter earlier, and you're very active. You've got a lot of followers on Twitter. How conscious are you of this idea of having a personal brand? As a senior guy in the sports business, your personal brand and reputation, do you think about that, and do you let that do some of your work for you?
I do. I'm very conscious of my brand, and I think I've reinvented my personal brand as my career has grown. In Jersey, not that I was personally more about more is more, but we were in survival mode. So my brand, had a different meaning in Jersey. In Brooklyn, it's changed. And I think as you grow in your career and you entertain different environments, your personal brand goes along with it. And, as we've positioned ourselves as a premium product in Brooklyn, as we've taken the less is more philosophy, that's had a little bit more of a rub off on my brand. Obviously having been in NASCAR, when you think of commercialization, that's the epitome of a sponsorship environment. We don't live in that world in Brooklyn. It truly is less is more. When you think about how we go after partners and how we infuse their brands into our venue.
So I think as I've gone along in my career, my own personal brand has changed. And I think it's important, to have a personal brand, because I think, from my perspective, it opens up a lot of doors for me. The credibility of some of the things I've done in the past. I think CEOs who I meet with in boardrooms want to know that there's a reference point, and it does help.
Quick question about NASCAR. Obviously, you've left NASCAR now, so you can say what you really think about NASCAR. We've got someone from Chip Ganassi Racing on a bit later, but I don't know if he's in the room, so you can say what you think about NASCAR. A lot of people say that as a sponsor, you get most bang for your buck in NASCAR. The fans of NASCAR are so into the sponsor brands. They love a call to action, and they act. Having left NASCAR, working in basketball now, do you agree with that?
I do. I think NASCAR is an incredible platform for sponsors. I think what the sport has done, and they did it organically, I'm not sure they set out to accomplish what they've done, but they've made a true connection between the fan and the sponsors. When you support a sponsor, the consumer truly feels that car can go faster because I'm supporting, the brand that is aligned with XYZ team and or driver. So that connectivity, I think, is critical, and they've done a wonderful job of doing that. I think over the last couple of years, unfortunately, NASCAR has lost a little bit of its luster and identity, and I think they're searching for that again now. Where do they want to be in the sports landscape in the U.S.? How do they position themselves differently? There was a period of time when I was there, and it's been quite some time since I was there, where they were growing extremely fast, and they might have gone a little too fast, too soon. Tracks are reducing seating capacity now, and maybe there's too much inventory in the sport, so you're seeing that, the sponsorship climate not as robust as it once was. But I think it's a viable platform. It's an exciting sport. It's great, live action. I still think it's challenged as it relates to how it's translated onto TV, but I think as a live sport, it's incredible. So,
it's not just going around in circles.
No.
Final question from me. I am going to invite some more from the floor. You talked about the importance of the Barclays deal for positioning Barclays Centre as this sort of international venue. You are in the process of revamping the Nassau Coliseum, a historic venue in Long Island, or near Long Island, and you're selling naming rights for that venue as well. This is an issue that we have here in the UK. We have a lot of historic venues, and now naming rights are sort of the thing. How difficult is it to get a naming rights partner for a venue that already has a brand?
Well, in some respects, it can be difficult. I think you need to be creative and innovative. We're about to name a naming rights partner for that venue, but we went about it.
Who is it?
Well, we can't disclose that today. But we went about it a little differently versus putting a name on the building. The project in itself is more than just the Coliseum. We are also developing 200,000 square feet of retail right next door in phase one. And then later on, probably in 3 to 5 years, we'll do another 200,000 of retail. So ultimately, we'll have about 400,000 square feet of retail that complements the venue. So it is going to be a year-round destination. So what we've decided to do, and thankfully we were successful in doing it, is we sold the naming rights to the entire project. Because I think rebranding the Coliseum would have been challenging. It's 43 years old. It's implanted in everyone's mindset. And even if we tried to rebrand it, I think they would have always called it the Coliseum or Nassau Coliseum. So we decided to take a different approach. And I think the approach we've taken is quite different than it has typically been done in naming rights. But it delivered us not only a great strategic partner, but a great financial deal.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Any more questions from the floor before we send Brett back to Brooklyn? In the front here, this is going to be a tricky position for a microphone to come to you, so I'm going to continue talking until that microphone does arrive. Here it is.
Well done. Simon Long, Replicom. Quick question. Very well, thanks. You've mentioned about cool and relevance, and we heard about KSI earlier. When a challenger property like esports or a sport comes into our world, our traditional world, how do you respond to something like that? How do you integrate that within your brand? Do you ignore it? Do you embrace it? How do you stay cool alongside innovations like that?
I'm trying to understand the question when you said locally here. The dynamic that you're dealing with, just so I can understand a little bit better.
There's a lot of talk at the moment about a new challenger in sport called esports. So, digital gaming, online competitive formats, and so forth.
They're launching a couple of the leagues and businesses in the U.S. now. So.
Just wondered what impact that has on your thinking moving forward around your bricks and mortar offer and the entertainment that you have in your venues when you've got such a growing digital opportunity out there.
Well, I mean, from our perspective, I mean, I'm even engaged right now with some of the esports developers in the U.S. I mean, IMG and Turner Sports just announced a new initiative, in esports, and they're going to play their championships ultimately in a venue. So I'm embracing it. We're in the content business, and from a venue perspective, I've got to embrace all forms of content because I want that content to play out in Brooklyn. So I've been negotiating, in fact, with those parties to bring some of that content into Brooklyn. So from a building perspective, I like it because we've got 365 days to fill. So to the extent that I can embrace new and engaging platforms and be a host venue for some of those platforms to play out, we're going to do that very aggressively. Same thing with the Nassau Coliseum. We don't have a core tenant like the Islanders or the Nets. So in that respect, it even makes my life a little harder and more challenging out there to bring as much content into the building as possible. So again, embracing some of these new platforms is something that certainly we're going to do, not only now but in the future. And to take it one step further, to the extent that we can participate, from an equity standpoint, we're pursuing that now too. I mean, we look at ourselves as a promoter, and we take a lot of risk in our building. And if that means buying content, that means buying content. If it means partnering with content providers on a 50-50 perspective, we'll do that too. It's a very competitive landscape in New York when you think of all the buildings and the venues, not just in New York, but outside of New York. And that's one way where we can really be successful, because most buildings are run by municipalities, so they don't have the wherewithal and the capital to go out and invest in content. We're buying content all the time, and we'll continue to.
Ladies and gents, I'm afraid that is all we've got time for.
I've got some gifts for you.
No.
Yes, I've got some gifts for you.
You're not going to present them to me on stage?
Yeah, real quick.
I'm British, Brett. I don't do...
So this is our new third jersey, the Islanders jersey, which we launched. It's black and white, as you can see. And for some of you that are on the team side and looking to reinvent yourselves, but also pay homage to the traditions that exist, you'll see here, for those Islander faithful, these 4 stripes represent 4 Stanley Cups. As you can see here, we've infused the orange and blue, which speaks to the traditional colors of the team. So, and this happens to be the #1 seller in the NHL right now. Last name is Emmett. See him on the ice next week in Brooklyn. Okay? So this is one for you. Okay? All right. This team is really, at the heart of everything we're building in Brooklyn. I can't give an Islanders jersey without giving a Brooklyn jersey, so this is our Brooklyn jersey. Last name, Emmett. All right? So.
Okay, all right. Very embarrassing. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, Brett Yormark, thank you.